and welcome everybody. Today we are going to be, well, my esteemed Egagasini colleagues, Nicole and Erika, are going to be telling us all about ecosystem accounting and ocean accounts, the what, why, who, and how. So Nicole du Plessis is a science officer at Egagasini. She focuses her work on the science industry engagement to help marine science research along. She's supporting the DSI's regional policy priorities, mostly working in the Indian Ocean region, and more recently is focusing on the ocean accounts development in South Africa, working closely with Professor Ken Findlay at CPUT, I believe. Erika is contracted to SAEON via the Nelson Mandela University Coastal and Marine Research Institute. And Erika is a GIS product developer. That is her core skill. And she's working within the realm of ocean accounts using her GIS skills. Their work together is part of the NRF Communities of Practice project, the Western Indian Ocean, looking at how to apply the ocean accounts framework in Algoa Bay, specifically as a case study. So today they're going to be telling us all about this ocean accounts and why it seems like a worthwhile accounting process to take on at a regional and potential national level. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Erika. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, Erika. Thanks.
Great. So thanks, Laura, for the introduction. And as she said, the what is the NRF Communities of Practice in the Western Indian Ocean, assessing the applicability of the ocean accounts framework. And that's funded by the NRF, SAEON, and Nelson Mandela University Coastal Marine Research. So who is actually involved in this work? Let's have a look at that. So I'm going to talk through these first two slides and then hand over to Nicole for a few slides about the why and SAEON's context, and then she'll hand back over to me. I'm going to switch my video off while I'm talking just to create more space in my world. So these are our partners that we're affiliated with in the community of practice. And just to give you an overview, our oceans are under ever increasing anthropogenic pressures and are considered the next economic frontier. This fact will only increase those pressures, and it is up to all of us to help sustainably navigate this rapid development. This is apparent in the international discussions on the development of ocean economies or blue economies, including such initiatives as the Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, and more locally, the African Union 2050, Africa's Integrated Maritime Strategy, and South Africa's Ocean Spakisa Program. South Africa is also one of 5 countries participating in the United Nations Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services project, which is led by SAEON and SAMBI nationally, which aims to assist the participating partner countries to advance the knowledge agenda on environmental and ecosystem accounting and initiate pilot testing of the system of environmental economic accounting and ecosystem accounting. After a recent review process, the ecosystem accounting went from being experimental to a fully fledged system, which Nicole will speak more about now. And this is all with a view to improving the management of natural biotic resources, ecosystems, and their services at the national level, as well as mainstreaming biodiversity and ecosystems in national level policy planning and implementation. Our partners in the community of practice ocean accounts work are shown above, and the Ocean Accounts Framework provides a common, consistent, and standardized information infrastructure for organizing and integrating ocean data from various domains. It is increasingly being recognized as an important ocean governance and policy development instrument, which boosts the transdisciplinary power of data from marine spatial planning, integrated coastal management, and international reporting. The goal of this community of practice is to assess the applicability of the Ocean Accounts Framework in South Africa and in the Western Indian Ocean region as a central component of a wider strategy to ensure that ocean governance contributes as optimally as possible to the broader sustainable goals of South Africa and the other Indian Ocean Rim Association, the IORA member states, by ensuring the inclusivity, safety, security, and sustainability of coastal communities. So we'll hear now from Nicole a little more in depth on the SEA and EA systems that I spoke to you. So.
Thanks, Erika. So I just wanted to provide more context on where we came or fit into the community of practice. And this really came about through our work in the South African chapter of the Indian Ocean Rim Association academic group, for which we are the secretariat. And we were really looking at creating a more collaborative project than had previously been undertaken within our national academic group, which was very much focused on very specific areas such as disaster risk management, maritime safety and security, and tourism. And so we wanted to also look at something that was applicable, that could be applicable regionally. And so if we get the phase 2 of this community of practice funding, if we get funding for that, then the intention is to test the Ocean Accounts Framework in other African coastal countries. And so as Erika had indicated, in March this year, the UN adopted the SEA Ecosystem Accounting Framework so that it's no longer known as an experimental accounts. And so there are now calls to integrate this into national reporting programs so that states are not only reporting on their GDP, but also reporting on nature's contribution to their economies or their ecosystem services. Next slide, please. And so part of the ecosystem accounting process, which I thought was really cool, was them developing this ARIES program, which is an artificial intelligence, or what they call an artificial intelligence modeler. So rather than it being a single model or collection of models, the ARIES program actually chooses the appropriate models based on the available data and needs. And so it follows the FAIR principle, so that this data, the data that are used and this program development is set up to be, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Currently, it's only functional for extent accounts based on the IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology for condition accounts, but only currently for forest ecosystem types. And I tried to find some examples of what forest condition indicators are, but I'm sure that there are probably better site-specific or local indicators that would make more sense. And this can be, or should be able to be fed into the ARIES program to create these condition accounts. And then it's also able to provide ecosystem service accounts, both for physical accounts and monetary accounts. But the capability of this whole system is currently being further developed so that it can produce accounts for all the various ecosystem types. So not only terrestrial, but ocean accounts as well. Next slide, please. So Africa has now developed its own national natural capital accounting 10-year strategy. This was part of the UN-funded project that Erika previously mentioned. South Africa has, in fact, done some natural capital accounts previously, such as the water accounts, which I think was produced in 2002. There were also some fish stock accounts, and now more recently, last year and this year, there was this report on the potential costs and benefits of improving land degradation in KwaZulu-Natal. And then also the ecosystem accounts for South Africa's estuaries, looking at extent, condition, and ecosystem services. And this is obviously in collaboration with SANBI and Stats SA. Next slide, please. So just looking at some of the data that they used within the estuary accounts to create the health index. They looked at a number of abiotic and biotic indicators, such as water quality, physical habitats, macrophytes, invertebrates, and bird species. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so where we saw the opportunity to contributing to this from the ocean accounts standpoint, as you know, SAEON's marine and coastal nodes, is the fact that the AU sees the blue economy as this new frontier of African renaissance, and so there are a number of programs or sector developments that are going to be placing additional pressure on the oceans. Currently, most of the African states don't have well-developed ocean economies. It's usually some offshore oil and gas and fisheries and port developments, but there's obviously a whole lot of other industries that are being developed as well. And so developing and implementing the ocean account strategy and also along with the marine spatial planning at such an early stage of development, I think would be quite beneficial. And obviously MSP, as a very simplistic definition, kind of looks at what the activities are, where the activities are taking place, where you might to create new activities. But the ocean accounts framework provides you with some decision support methodology to determine the trade-offs between the different sectors, stakeholders, and users. So it's really kind of a complementary process. And so then just looking at all the policies that have been developed both within Africa and obviously and nationally. There's the Africa's Agenda 2063. There's been the Integrated Maritime Strategy. It's currently also the Decade of African Seas and Oceans. There's now been this publication of Africa's Blue Economy Strategy that's looking at sector development, but also looking at conservation and sustainable use, climate resilience, environment and infrastructure, job creation and poverty eradication. And of course, we've got our own Oceans Pakisa program. So while SAEON might not be very involved in the actual account productions, because that's at the Stats SA as the mandate for that and for the reporting to our international programs. At least when it comes to the data that SAEON is collecting as South Africa's long-term environmental observation program, I do think it's important for us to look at the value addition that our data can provide and where it can support other national priorities. And so we took advantage of the opportunity to be involved in the Oceans Account Community of Practice as not only a case study for the Ocean Accounts Framework, but also how oceanographic data can be valuable within this. Thank you. So I'll just hand back over to Erika to provide a more in-depth overview of why we need to develop ocean accounts. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. So I'll start recognizing that a lot of you are terrestrial researchers, I'll kind of go into a little bit of why specifically in the ocean space, and that's fairly obvious, I suppose, but why we might need to consider and implement ocean accounts. Oceans are distinctly different from the terrestrial environment. The boundaries are vague, it's highly dynamic and a multi-dimensional space. There's steadily increasing economic activity in our oceans and seas. There's an increase in stakeholders and users. There's a lot of gaps in knowledge and data within this space. And it's also dispersed and expensive data to acquire. Legislation is also evolving and at times unclear in ocean space. Also jurisdictions unclear, and it's an extensive area to manage. So this complexity begs for integrated management plans like we see globally in countries like the Netherlands, the UK, and Israel, for example. And then also locally programs, the South African Marine Spatial Planning process, Zambia's National Biodiversity Assessment as an ongoing way of dealing with the complexities in the ocean space. OSIM's Spatial Information Management System, more locally and relevant for us is Nelson Mandela University's Algoa Bay project, also programs like Marisma's EBSA process. And often these plans and programs are centered around maps and the geospatial context. And another reason as to why humans derive numerous benefits from complex ocean systems through ecosystem and abiotic services. Both market and non-market values and assets require accounting in the estimation of the contribution of oceans to societal well-being, as do the impacts of economies on environment. New blue economy approaches to ocean governance are required to account for inclusivity and sustainability in these realms. Ocean accounts basically use a system where they develop integrated indicators that decision makers can understand for informed decision making that includes sustainability and inclusivity within ocean planning, extends from an ecosystem level to a national accounts level. The development of inventories that strengthen national statistical systems. 3, integration of large volumes of novel ocean data and identification of data gaps and needs. 4, justification of the value of research, management, and policy in the ocean space, and positioning of strategy development in ocean economic development. And just a larger context within Africa, the need for ocean accounts in Africa. It may seem obvious to you, but 70%, that's 38 of Africa's 54 sovereign states are coastal. Africa has a coastline of approximately 30,500 to 40,000 kilometers. South Africa alone has 3,200 kilometers of coastline. Africa's oceans and inland water areas are 3 times the size of its land mass. Maritime zones under Africa's jurisdiction total approximately 13 million square kilometers and about 6.5 million square kilometers of relatively accessible continental shelf. 90% of Africa's imports and exports are conducted by sea. So with some understanding of what ocean accounts is and why we might need to develop its use in South Africa, let's look at how that can be done. So this center picture is the technical guide on ocean accounting for sustainable development. So the Global Oceans Accounts Partnership developed this guide, or this latest version of it, to show what it says, and serves as the main resource for implementing ocean accounts. There have been several iterations of this guide, and it will continue to evolve at least into the near future, as ocean accounts is in its infancy and still under development. It's a very useful document and puts all the aforementioned frameworks and accounting systems in context and provides some guidance when embarking on establishing an ocean accounts framework. So I'm using it on a regular basis as a reference. The 5 points noted here on the right included in the guide Number 1, sustainability indicators. Number 2, the sectoral evaluation, finance and investment. Number 3, strategic sectoral development planning. Number 4, spatial management. Number 5, ocean analyses, monitoring and assessment. Our particular working group is focused in the areas number 4 and 5 as a means of feeding back into sustainability indicators, which is the fundamental goal to achieve for ocean accounts. The community of practice that we're a part of is split up into 8 different working groups. So we have the legal environment and regulatory aspects of the ocean accounts framework and work program 1. Work program 2, which is our group, the role of oceanographic research and large data sets for ocean accounting models within ocean governance. Work program 3, the structure of the ocean accounts framework and ocean governance. Work program 4 is women's economic empowerment in the Western Indian Ocean. Work program 5 is the socio-ecological aspects of the ocean accounts framework. Work program 6 is the blue carbon habitat aspects of the ocean accounts framework. Work program 7 is the risks and vulnerability in the ocean. And work program 8 focuses on the ocean accounts framework related knowledge production and opportunities across all of the work programs. So as Nicole stated, we're focused for this case study in Algoa Bay that partially came to be because of the challenges caused by COVID-19 and the global pandemic, and they wanted to scale back the area that we were focusing on to start with. So I'll speak a little about that now. But aside from the COVID-19 limitations, Algoa Bay offers a great opportunity for study because there is such a complex web of users in the bay, and it is a productive upwelling environment and highly dynamic system. There's long-term data availability, and there's a cross-organization collaboration and a great body of work being done in this area. We are assessing the applicability of ocean data and research in the ocean accounts framework, and we have found incredible value in using the ocean available data sets in the bay, are immersed in multi-dimension analysis and visualization of the data, as well as recognize the challenge of inconsistent coverage and aim to incorporate modeled data to help fill in situ gaps in data. So this map is showing a lot of the different data being collected and instruments that are in place in the bay and the surrounding area. And for this work program, we are focused on the sentinel sites and the contributions of long-term data from Ulwanle and their sentinel sites. And I'm going to speak now about a little more about how we're going about implementing ocean accounts from a spatial point of view and how we're representing a multi-dimensional space. So the ocean is large, three-dimensional, moving, and much is outside national jurisdictions, and spatial data are collected by many local, national, and international organizations. This poses challenges to mapping. Therefore, only 20% of the ocean seafloor has been mapped in terms of depth, that's bathymetry, and less than 0.001% has been sampled in terms of substrate and biota. Only the surface of the ocean is visible from satellite. This requires special attention to establishing a spatial data infrastructure that will serve to integrate many types of data, including from local in situ studies in an ocean space. Following a study by Serre et al. 2017, we can see how an ocean mesh or grid can be applied to derive a systematic framework for mapping multi-dimensional ocean space. So if you can see on the slide here, there's discrete data points, these pink dots. There's discrete data point columns represent continuous measurement of multiple variables through the water column. The idea is to apply this method of data visualization at a bay scale in Algoa Bay. So Egagasini, Ulwanle, and Owazi are working together to create an Esri-based map atlas of sorts where SAEON's ecological marine units, these pink columns of data and information we're going to use to develop this at a local scale. So where you would see one of these points, you would go through the water column and you could look at anything from dissolved oxygen, temperature, salinity, turbidity, a suite of nutrients through the water column. So this type of online user tool would be accessible to policymakers and researchers and scientists. It's called the Ecological Marine Unit Explorer and provides access to physical and biochemical data through the water column. But at present, this project was by Esri performed at a global scale, and this is just an example of the extent to which it goes. So you can see here that it only goes up to just offshore, and we would like to focus and create a similar type application at a bay scale and within the Bay Area. So we aim to create a localized version of this product. When the user clicks on the station point, represented here by the black buoy marker, a series of pop-up profiles and charts can be accessed, which represent physical variables through the water column at that point. So this is the type of information that you would get access to. Again, like I said, this is the Esri Cadillac version of what's available and what you can do. The pop-up windows include profiles, tables, and charted statistics of variables such as temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, and a suite of nutrients. The idea is to create a simplified version of this tool in the Bay Area. In addition to discrete point station-based physical and biological data within the Bay, a series of layers or feature classes the users can access to show varying types of marine space use within the Bay will be available. This public access product would be hosted by Esri, and the data used to create the product would sit in SAEON's Open Data Portal, the ODP. The ecosystem accounting tables would also be available upon request. So the role I'm playing presently is gathering ocean ecosystem related empirical data and developing a means to visualize the data in a GIS platform in alignment with the work of the Algoa Bay project and SAMBI's NBA 2018. This will serve as an opportunity to see how oceanographic variables, continuous spinoscale monitoring can bolster the important work completed to date in Algoa Bay, and ideally will serve as an example of what we can be achieved for South Africa's coastal Western Indian Ocean regions. And this is just speaking to the application and how it would feed into an easily accessible and understandable tool that policymakers and decision makers and planners could use. In summary, we can't expect policymakers to have an in-depth understanding of all that is at play in the ocean environment, and yet it is critical to encompass and understand all the varying pressures that our oceans are under, as well as the multitude of ways society interacts with, utilizes, extracts, and relies on our seas. By bridging communication between scientists and researchers to management, planners, and policymakers through ecosystem accounting in an ocean accounts framework, and visually connecting all of the dots and providing more easily digestible indicators of these pressures and how they change with time, will help planning and prioritizing important decisions for national departments, and will also highlight where we need to make great improvements or initiate new policy to facilitate more sustainable management of our local seas. If you have any questions or would like to contribute in data knowledge or expertise in this area, we can chat now in these next 15 minutes, or you can also get in touch with Nicole or myself. And thank you for listening and for attending today.
Thank you very much, Erika and Nicole. That is really fascinating stuff. And even though it is limited to Algoa Bay, I think it is quite a substantial undertaking to pull all that together. So I'm looking forward to seeing results of how this comes together. Very exciting. I don't know whether anybody has any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I'm sure there must be some questions, and I'm sure Erika and Nicole will do their best. Anyone? No, nothing going. Maybe I'll kick it off. I have a question or two. We don't get to see each other and chat very often these days. So I'll kick off with a question, if you don't mind. And one of my first questions really is, how much have you managed to get the industry sectors to buy in with this kind of work? Probably more to Nicole, I think. I don't know. Nicole interacts with industry a lot, but obviously the oil and gas, maybe not so much in Algoa Bay, but certainly in the bigger picture of ocean accounting. Oil and gas industry and the fishing sector in South Africa are possibly the biggest users. How much have you managed to get them to buy in?
Not really at all. We haven't kind of focused on that side of things as yet. I think it kind of became clear that we kind of first need to have this product that we can, you know, start shopping around to get more buy-in. So I think that's kind of where the focus is at the moment.
Okay.
Also for, I think, just to add, for the national departments as well, so they can kind of see what this process is about. So we're kind of looking for the output first, and then we'll, I think, start engaging and then building from that.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Amelia has put in a question in the chat. I'll just read it out. And Amelia is asking, what type of physiochemical data do you think is most important for decision makers to have access to? So
I'll answer.
Thanks, Erika.
Yeah. So from an oceanographic point of view, I think the most critical data to have access to is sea temperature, salinity, and like a suite of nutrients and chlorophyll as indicators of water quality. So all of those things, water quality. I think there would also be important to have access to pH as an indicator for ocean acidity, but that can be connected to temperature with warming, etc. So those are kind of the general suite of physical and biological data that you have access to that are relevant to a decision-making process and that you can track over time. And I don't know if anyone, even yourself, Laura, wanted to add to this, but that's short answer of that question. You can pull in other things, but that would be the basic suite of data.
Thanks, Erika.
I just want to can I expand on that a bit, Laura?
Sure.
I'm just curious. So that's an excellent answer, and I absolutely agree with those as markers of environmental change and critical points where you can see that fluctuation happening. Do you think that decision makers in South Africa are capable of interpreting that without further diagnostics? You know, it's one of those things. You know, how do you present this data so that it can people can make decisions based off of it?
So I think the end goal with ocean accounts has to do more with sustainability indicators. So there's there's a lot of case studies in other countries where they're further down the road with ocean accounts and how they've implemented it. And there's risk assessments, and there's also indicators in terms of pressure and cumulative pressure on a system based on the multitude of users and based on, I mean, you wouldn't just be using physical data. So from a policymaker's point of view, they have access to a tool that puts it in a quite user-friendly package of, well, where's the most pressure in this space and how is it most valued from a holistic point of view, whether it's the economy or a marine protected area from a conservation perspective, that kind of takes into consideration all of those parts of this complex picture, and then says, you know, kind of spits out this simplified version, and that's where the support for policymakers, I think, can be really practical and understandable, and just, it's like a little package of information that's a little more easy to digest. The profiles and this type of application that I was pointing to is just a means of tracking it. It wouldn't necessarily be what a policymaker goes to, but it is there if they wanted to, or if there needed to be someone who is advising them from the scientific community that could use it as a means of motivating for something. So that's, I guess, the short answer. Nicole, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to say, I think that you know, at the national level, it's also just to provide. So we're all doing this kind of global change research. But I think this kind of draws everything that we are doing together. So instead of just having a publication, it would actually be on a national platform where you would kind of like track, okay, South Africa's waters are actually getting warmer or colder, or, you know, there are these specific changes that are happening within the statistical framework that they consider useful. And so I kind of see it not as, you know, duplicating any efforts, but taking what's already out there and packaging it within the ecosystem accounts.
Thanks, guys. Is there, on that note, is there sort of space for like change point analysis and looking at how those points are changing over time?
Ideally, yes.
Okay, cool.
That's the goal.
Awesome.
So we're working at the moment, working with just 2 years of data, but have 10 years of data. And the idea is this, it's an evolving thing that we continue to add to and develop, and have the time factor is very much a part of this. So trend analysis and change.
Thank you. Thanks.
I see.
Yeah, I wondered whether Sue would like to ask her question herself. She's put in something there, and I can read it, Sue, or you could ask if you would like, if you want to unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this approach, and I was wondering if there are any examples that you have where this approach has gained traction internationally and has actually already resulted in policy change or action. So where people are using frameworks like this actively in either terrestrial or ocean systems that have actually already gained traction, or is it still an early framework being developed globally?
In terms of the ocean accounts, sorry. In terms of the ocean accounts, I think it's still early phase, but the terrestrial accounts on the SAEON website, there are a number of countries that have already implemented it. China's done a lot of work. There are a number of reports that are online. Brazil. I think the biggest actual change, though, is just the fact that governments are actually taking this seriously now. And even within Africa, there are projects to start mapping their habitats or looking at ways of doing this quite cost effectively, because obviously a number of the states don't really have the resources. So looking at how we can do that with satellites and then maybe doing ground truthing afterwards. So I think for me, that's kind of like the biggest policy change. It's just like the seriousness that there is now.
Yeah, and I would add to that you hear me okay? That it's also just the mindset of not just looking at an ocean space or terrestrial space. I mean, the terrestrial realm is much further down the road, but looking at the ocean space and not just looking at what we can extract and what we can earn in a monetary sense, and how to value that. It's how you would value if you were to actually keep a space from having things extracted from it, and is that going to give more value over time and sustain a longer term, more holistic picture of that space being used, and taking into consideration, you know, I mean, South Africa is such a fascinating country to have something like this be tested in, because we gain so much and earn so much, and so much of our resources come from the sea, and our job stability and food security. So it's quite a critical environment to look at from a complete perspective. And so it is in its early stages in the countries where it's been rolled out in the marine space, but there are examples from, as Nicole pointed out, on the terrestrial side where it's sparked change in policy and consideration. Thanks for that question.
Thanks, Erika, Nicole, and Sue. I hope that answers your question, Sue. Zach is asking whether, can we play around with the Esri output? I'm not sure whether Zach is asking if that is the existing one on the global scale or the one that you guys are still developing. I don't know if Zach wants to clarify.
So I'll post the link for the global Esri Ecological Marine Unit Explorer, and then from our side, we're still in development phase, but yes, you will be able to play around with it when it's complete.
My understanding is that that global one, you can play around with it. It's quite a very interactive. Yeah. So maybe that's
very playful.
Yeah, there's Zach.
All right. Yeah, I'd love to play around with it. Thank you.
Yeah, the global one is really fascinating. Even for me, that's not really much of a GIS person, I have to say. Can get quite carried away with the clicking here and the clicking there. It is quite phenomenal. Although my biggest criticism was the resolution, obviously, and I kept trying to understand where they got their data from, because we don't even have that level of data for our waters. But anyway, that's another question.
So I'll post both links, because there's a description of the data and a reference to a paper, and then also a link to the actual tools. So I'll put both of those in the chat now.
Thanks, Erika. I think that's, everyone would be quite interested in that. That's great. Thank you. And then Lisa is asking about extending to St. Francis Bay, and I see Tommy has already answered that we could extrapolate to around the corner, but the lack of the pelagic ecosystem data in St. Francis would limit that output. I don't know whether you guys have encountered that issue, or Tommy maybe wants to expand.
Yeah, maybe I can just say, I think a lot hinges on the pelagic ecosystem data in Algoa Bay as well, especially the nutrients and the chlorophyll A, you know, as an indication of productivity. And unfortunately, we do not have that data for St. Francis Bay currently. So, you know, that will limit in what we can produce. But it is possible, you know, to eventually link all of these to satellite remotely sensed data products, and use Algoa Bay as the study, and then see how effectively we can develop oceans accounts using remotely sensed data for other areas that we do not have the in situ data for. Thanks.
Thanks, Tommy. That's great. I actually wanted to ask, of course I wanted to ask the impossible, guys. You know what's coming, is have we managed to incorporate anything on the sea floor, or are we still in the water column only?
So we're in the water column, which is a good step in the right direction, and the seafloor and also sub-sea floor is definitely a part of this, but we're not there yet. We are in contact with Council for Geosciences, and we just don't have that data for the seafloor in Algoa Bay, but we're working, but it is a part of it. It's an integral part of it.
Very. I wanted to suggest something to start with and look at is Tommy's and his team have been doing a lot of the sediment profiling, you know, the sediment particle size, and it's been processed. And I wondered if you'd picked up on that sediment particle size yet, and maybe not yet, but in time, when you start getting to that, if you get there, that would be really a good starting point, because Tommy knows the data is all there, and Hannah processed it, so it's all readily available. Anyway, that would just be my comment on that.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to include that as a layer.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I can just answer. Erika has asked for this data from me for months and months now, so it's my fault. Sorry, Laura.
Okay, but
I'll get on it.
I'm going to get it today. I can feel it.
Yeah, no, I can help you. Tommy, I think I can help because Hannah has it. Remember, you gave it to Hannah.
Yes,
so
I gave it to Hannah.
Yeah, it's just the joining of the dots.
Yes. There's just a section that I didn't send to Hannah because she wasn't interested in it, and that's the holdup, is that I wanted to include that component as well, that some of the fourth year students did.
Awesome. All right, then I won't interfere further.
No,
Sorry.
No, thank you, please.
Okay. Look, I'm the chair. I'm not supposed to ask all these difficult questions. I just want to check whether I think Sue has posted another question. We are starting to run out of time. Johan has posted some very valuable comments in the chat. I'm not sure whether he would like to elaborate on any of those valuable comments. And Sue has a question. I'm not sure if she would like to ask the question herself.
I think let Johan go. I've already had my airtime. Thanks.
Thanks, Johan.
Hi guys. Yeah, this is amazing. I don't like accounting, so whenever I see the topic accounting, and even when it's ecosystem accounting, I bypass because it sounds like something I can't stomach. So this is amazing, and I'm really impressed. I think we must do much more of this across the board, across our biomes, also coastal systems, offshore. And the remarks I don't have to elaborate on, other than to say that I think this accounting cannot happen without data being shared openly and freely. And that is one of the latest developments in NRF. Tony has sent around an email this morning asking for comments on the draft NRF policy on open science. So that is very, very important. And the other thing is that clearly this is an extension of the observation work that SAEON is doing across all its platforms, and taking data into the policy domain, which is always a difficult one, and one where we're still very weak. So if we can have this kind of tool, it's very much the same kind of aha stuff that we have based on our atlases produced by Ulwazi. So, I really just see a lot of ground still to be broken in going forward, but it will have a major impact. And that is the other side of things. The worldwide science is now really forced to explain the impact side of the work, and it doesn't come naturally to all the work that we do, but when we see this kind of tool being developed, we have the answer. We can show how the science will have impact Okay, so great stuff, Nicole and Erika. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Right. Cool. Is there anybody else who has any burning questions? I think we have a few more minutes. I think we can go till 11 or so. Anyone else? Okay. Caitlin has asked me to please advertise the next SAEON Science Seminar, which will be taking place on the 6th of August. The presenter is Marlies Muller from the Ndlovu node, and the title is The Drought Effects on Floristic Diversity in the Threatened Woodbush Granite Grassland of South Africa. I would have to tune in to find out where that is exactly, so it shows my ignorance on terrestrial ecology. But that will be happening on the 6th of August, I assume 10 a.m. as they normally are, and Caitlin will kindly be advertising that again for us closer to the time. So if there isn't anything further on this particular topic, or for Erika and Nicole, I'm sure they are open to further emails or contact if need be, or if any further questions in time come up. But yeah, if not, then thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to Erika and Nicole for a really interesting presentation and showing us all what we can look forward to with this amazing product. Well done, guys. Looks exciting. Thanks. Thanks everyone, and yeah, signing off for a good Friday and hopefully a good, safe weekend for you all.